VikesNow, I am Dustin Baker. This is the Week 3 edition. In 5 days, the Vikings host the Houston Texans, a battle of undefeateds. The Danielle Hunter, Stephon Diggs reunion game. It should be Case Keenum too, but he's hurt. Jonathan Greenard versus his own team, Jonathan Grenard versus his own team. Blake Cashman, Eden Prairie native against his old team. There's all kinds of cool storylines. So if you are going to this game, I'm going to bet you're going to a pretty sweet one. Let's hope it turns out as sweet as the upset over the 49ers. The Vikings waltzed into that game 4.5, 5-point underdogs, and for a second consecutive year, stunned the San Francisco 49ers. Kevin O'Connell was in his bag, proving to the world that, he can coach some football. That was one of my favorite parts of this 2-0 starter, is one of my favorite parts, is it's just commonly accepted now that Kevin O'Connell is one of the NFL's best head coaches, and that was kind of debatable after 7-10 last year. But a question I keep getting asked, kind of in the shadows, mainly because a lot of us lived through 2016. I get asked, is this sustainable for the Vikings? Is this Vikings 2-0 start a mirage of any sorts? Because I'm guessing if I had this exact show in 2016, we'd be pretty damn excited as well about that 5-0 start before it utterly collapsed to the tune of 8-8, the dreaded 8-8. So I want to take the next several minutes to chat about whether or not this Vikings start is a mirage. Let's set the table talking about 2016 as a point of reference. Indeed, I bought into that being an exciting season. I remember I tell this story pretty frequently. When the Vikings started 3-0, 4-0, 5-0 in 2016, I remember vividly looking at the schedule thinking, I just don't know who can beat the Vikings. That's how well they were playing on defense and special teams especially. But I want to, give you assurances that this year is different because this Vikings team is more balanced and has a deeper roster than 2016. You can probably say Sam Darnold and the Sams and Sam Bradford are a wash in terms of quarterback performance, especially, they were drafted somewhat close, third round for Darnold 2018, first overall for Bradford in 2009 or 10, whichever one he was. But I am here to tell you that if you are paranoid about this going like the 2016 season, which, make no mistake, was a wonderful start to the season, that year was propped up by defensive majesty and special teams luck, so to speak. The Vikings were scoring special teams and defensive touchdowns in 2016, propping up their success. And once those ran out, so went the enterprise. That season had historically bad rushing efficiency for the Vikings and in the NFL on the whole. And so far through 2 games, the 2024 Vikings have no problems with that. They're not getting lucky on defensive touchdowns like all across the operation from the 2024 Vikings. The defense is solid. The offense is obviously doing the trick. C.J. Ham's blocking punts. Who'd have thunk it? Will Reichard is perfect through 2 games. So I will severely brush back to any 2016 parallel because that team was that 5-game start was a really sweet ride that was all about defense and special teams. And probably both of those things were better than this defense. But the offense right now is humming to an extent during Sam Darnold's, let's just call it a honeymoon until it goes permanent. So that is my take on 2016 versus 2024. They feel similar in terms of your excitement, but they're markedly different in terms of roster construction and efficiency on all sides of the ball this year. So let's set the table in terms of how weird the NFL has been this season. DVOA, which is a cool metric developed by Aaron Schatz, who's been on this show. It lives at, is it Fantasy FTN or FTN Fantasy? I can never remember. Sorry, Aaron. It's one of those two. It just basically tells you like a projected... it gives you the statistical analysis of each team based on passing, rushing, offense, and defense, special teams, and tells you by the numbers how truly good your favorite football team is. And right now, the NFL's top 4 pecking order, if you can believe it, is the New Orleans Saints, number 1. Aaron Schatz actually predicted they would be good on this very show, so kudos for him. Seattle Seahawks, number 2. Los Angeles Chargers, working out right away for Jim Harbaugh in the gang. And then your Vikings at number 4. So, according to the numbers, through only 2 games, the Vikings are a top 4 NFL team. And we shall see if that continues this week against the Texans. I don't know why you'd want to believe this is a mirage, but if you want to know why you have that paranoia of, ooh, is this 2-0 start going to continue? I got a couple reasons why it could flounder. So, the Vikings are still turning the football over. I think they have 4 through 2 games. Darnold had his arm hit by Dexter Lawrence week 1, then threw the bad pick and a wonderful play by Fred Warner. So there have still been giveaway gaffes that have not subsided. But the difference this year is Brian Flores' defense is responding and getting turnovers back. The undoing of last year's Vikings was the turnover battle. Every week they seemed to lose it, and now, if you watch this show, you know the Kevin O'Connell stat that when his team wins or breaks even in the turnover differential battle, the Vikings are 19-0. So the turnover discussion, generally speaking, could be a reason why this team would regress, whether against the Texans, the Packers the week after that, across the pond in London. I'm kind of venturing to guess with the Sam Darnold experience, those turnovers are just going to be part of it. They're not as ghastly as Nick Mullins, where you're guaranteed 2 interceptions, and Darnold, you're guaranteed probably the 1. But if the defense is forcing their own turnovers, then it's kind of a wash, and you get back to a level playing field of who's got the better play caller, and usually that's Kevin O'Connell. So one thing I could see for this 2-game win streak honeymoon to vanquish or to just fall by the wayside would be, the Vikings don't get defensive turnovers in response to their turnovers, and we look up and we're like, okay, this just feels like last year all over again. There are too many turnovers. Another way that this thing could go pear-shaped is Sam Darnold personally. So I've talked at length with Yannick Eckhart, who's on this show about once monthly, another close confidant. Last year in the NFL, we remember all of the backup quarterbacks that got significant playing time. And it seemed like all of the good ones had about a 2-game shelf life, where it's like Josh Dobbs comes in, he looks really good. Jake Browning was about 3 games. So if you are a good QB2 who likes to nibble, at QB1, like patch over status, like if you need your Sam Darnold to JJ McCarthy, you go sign Jacoby Brissett, like one of those guys. Seems like they all have about 2 good games before defensive coordinators are like, don't start that shit with us. We watch the tape. You're not going to be good anymore. It's exactly what happened to Josh Dobbs. That, in theory, could happen to Darnold. I don't think it will, because this guy was the 3rd overall pick 6 years ago. He doesn't have problems with the arm talent. With Nick Mullins, he's a gunslinger, without bullets in the gun. And so with Sam Darnold, he's not really a gunslinger, but he has the entire weapon at complete arm talent, arm accuracy at his disposal. But hypothetically, we could get to next weekend or the one after that and be like, oh goodness, Sam Darnold has turned back into a pumpkin. And of course, that would sink the undefeated start and probably return us to, I would say, a revised 9-8, 10-7 ceiling if Darnold starts to play kind of mediocre. There's just no evidence to suggest, though, that his 2-game performance is an outlier. We've never doubted whether or not the guy can throw the ball. It's the turnovers, the fumbles, and then the rotten situations he's been in, from the Jets to the Panthers, who now are like a meme of, if your quarterback sucks, go get that guy because he's going to be good elsewhere. Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold, it's probably going to be Bryce Young within the next year or two. Reclamation projects galore are being pumped out of the Carolina Panthers system. So keep an eye on Darnold. I know you obviously will, but he is a reason. If he comes back to earth, then the Vikings would probably return to that mid-tier. They got a 2-game little boost now, maybe fringe playoff contender. And then on a side note, 3rd down efficiency, both defense and offense, has been pretty sexy through 2 games, especially on offense. We're not accustomed to that. Even with Kevin O'Connell, the 3rd down percentage hasn't been woo. But in these games, especially in meaningful 4th down situations, Sam Darnold has been money. But if the 3rd down stats regressed, then this would quickly turn into 2023 all over again, where every game is close, a nail-biter. But it's because of your ability to move the sticks on 3rd down that these games, the 49ers game, should have won that. Vikings should have won that by 20 to 24 points if they played a clean game. And then, of course, with the Giants, they did. They won by 22 points, excuse me. So a couple of other observations about this Mirage debate. When I look at the schedule now, and this is how you should look at it, if the Vikings are capable of beating the 49ers without some big-ass miracle. It wasn't a Brock Purdy fumble on his own one like Josh Allen, and then Eric Kendricks jumps on a touchdown Vikings. It wasn't a fluke that the Vikings beat the 49ers. Therefore, they can beat any team not named the Chiefs in the NFL. When you look at the schedule now, it kind of has that 2016 feel where you're like, none of these teams really scare me all that much now that I know the Vikings have a deep roster and they're good on top of it. So, going into the Houston Texans game, I think the Vikings are going to win that. I'm not going to go bet $1,000 on it, but I'm pretty sure the Vikings are just a good football team that will be able to go toe-to-toe with the Texans, and because they're at home, probably win the damn thing. When you watch other NFL games, probably on prime time, none of these teams look crazy impressive besides the Chiefs. You watch Eagles-Falcons last night, the Eagles don't look that great. They look good, kind of. They don't look great. The Lions lost to the Buccaneers. If you can beat the 49ers, you can beat anybody. Their roster is constructed fabulously from head to toe. And I'll reiterate, the Vikings beat the 49ers without... Ooh, boy, they got really lucky in that one. They didn't need that. They beat them somewhat handily and should have won by a little bit more than 6 points. There's also the schedule hump that we forecasted kind of in unison as a Vikings community when the schedule released in May and then subsequently in June, July, and August. We were scared of this start to the schedule, somewhat rightfully so, because we thought the Giants could be sneaky better than what we all watched Hard Knocks. Hey, they actually look pretty good. But then the Vikings beat them. But then after that, what do we have? The 49ers, the Texans. We thought Jordan Love's Packers, Aaron Rodgers in London, the Lions after the bye, Thursday Night Football on the road at the Rams, McVay's team. That slate was at 7 games. That was supposed to be brutal. And once you got over that hump, life breathed easy because it was the Colts and the Bears twice, of course, Titans, Jaguars, Cardinals who look good. All of those teams represented the easy part of the schedule once we got over the really tricky part. Well, 2 games into the really tricky part, the Vikings are already 2-0. Truth be told, it's like house money. If they lose to the Texans, because the Texans have a fabulous day and their roster is pretty sweet too, who cares? They already beat the Giants and the 49ers. They've built up a little bit of clout where you should give them the benefit of the doubt that if they lose to a good football team like the Texans, it's not the end of the world. But we thought, hey, if they can maybe be 3-5 by the start of November or whatever it might be, 3-4, the schedule will soften up, and then if they're a good football team, maybe they can get to 9-8, 10-7, and get in the postseason. Now you can realistically look at this schedule and say, if they get to November 4-2, then the schedule remains pretty easy. I don't have any qualms about going on the road to play the Titans, or is it the Jaguar? Yeah, they're going to Jacksonville. Those teams aren't gangbusters. And then even the Colts and the Cardinals coming to US Bank Stadium. That should not make you shake in your boots. So we went from analyzing the first part of the schedule, the first 2 months, thinking, God, if they're 2-5, then maybe things can get better with this schedule, to, oh my God, they're going to be 5-2, and then the easy part of the schedule is around the bend. That's a testament to how good this football team has looked for 2 weeks. A couple other things. The second to last one right now, per EPA per play, which is expected wins added. It's an efficiency metric that looks at how good your quarterback is, how good your offense is, how good your defense is. It was, I believe it's Ben Baldwin's tool that he got off the ground several years ago. Per EPA per play, which is a very valid metric to measure how good you are, the Vikings rank 4th on defense and 6th on offense. They are not like, hey, 17th on defense, 18th on offense, but the ball is bouncing their way. They are legitimately good at their craft on offense and defense, and you don't need a bunch of late-game heroics to beat the other team. And the only reason I bring that up is because close games and late-game heroics have been the Vikings' signature since about the 2020 season, is when all these close games started happening. If you're a football team, even if it's through 2 games, perhaps it'll go longer, that ranks in the top 10 offense and defense, wipe that smile off your face. You're just a good football team, and that's what the Vikings are right now. So it's not a mirage statistically, I guess, is the way that I would say it. In short, and this is going to be Captain Obvious. This thing really comes down to Sam Darnold. And I don't know how long he'll be the Vikings quarterback. My wife was asking that on the way back from Minneapolis. Like, well, what happens if he throws 35 touchdowns and they get to the Super Bowl? Like, do they bring him back? The only problem with Sam Darnold throwing 30 touchdowns and 4,000 passing yards is he will need to get paid. And the Vikings have their trustworthy commodity in J.J. McCarthy waiting in the wings, recovering from meniscus tear. If Darnold drags the Vikings to the postseason, wins a game there, gets the NFC Championship, something funkier than that, I don't know if they're going to turn around and pay him 35, 40, 45 million bucks for a year when they have McCarthy, who they love. That's a discussion we'll have ad nauseum, if applicable, in December, January, and February. But the where the Vikings are at really depends on how clean Darnold plays. We don't have to debate whether or not he can make the throws, but we do have to debate whether or not it's just one turnover per game and not 2 and 3. So on the whole, where I stand, I do not think the Vikings are a mirage. I think my 7-10 prognostication was too low on Sam Darnold and was too low on the whole because the defense is really good. We kind of thought that would happen. I believe at this moment, after seeing 2 games of evidence and sample, that the Vikings are probably going to end up being about a 10-7 team, 9-8. I don't know if they have the juice to get past the Lions in the NFC North. Who knows how the Packers season eventually goes with Jordan Love's health. But I think they're a playoff contender, which means they can get there and then maybe get frisky if Darnold's the real deal. But like the rest of you, it's way too soon to say Super Bowl baby because we never say that unless you're coming off the 2009 NFC Championship or 2017 NFC Championship. And you just need a lot more of Darnold experience to figure out if he is the real deal. So yeah, you heard it from my lips. I do believe that the Vikings can reach the postseason, and they have a 2-game head start, which is what only 6-7 other teams can say for it. They went from postseason odds of about 27-28% 2.5 weeks ago to now sports books it's about 51-52%. So to an extent, odds makers are buying into this early season Vikings hype. But I will say, yes, I think that right now it won't be weird one iota if they can hit 9-8, 10-7, reach the postseason. But we need to see a really prolonged win streak or probably get to something like 7-1, 8-1 before we look around and be like, oh my God, is Sam Darnold going to be the guy that wins the Vikings Super Bowl? We probably won't get that high on him or them, but it's a really fun flyover season when we thought we got Darnold at quarterback, J.J. McCarthy's hurt, he'll be back next year. Let's see what happens. Maybe get frisky, go 8-9, get the 7th seed. It feels a lot better than that right now. So I will say playoff contender, you bet, after a 2-0 start, but Super Bowl contender, I don't think anybody's reasonably thinking about that quite yet. All right, we'll be back tomorrow talking to Josh Fry about some damn thing, probably previewing Texans-Vikings. That's all I got for today. Skol, baby.